Mr. Robert LaSardo is on the line. Let's see. Is this the one, the only Mr. Robert LaSardo?
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. Who am I speaking with?
This is Bay from Totally Driven Radio.
Hi, Bay. And how you doing tonight?
Good, man. Good. And I also have my co-host on here, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hey. How you doing tonight?
I'm well, brother. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that both of you gentlemen were kind enough to invite me to your show.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on. Love to talk to you about your career and everything and things you've been through in your life, tattoos. I mean, you've been through a lot.
Yeah, I think I've had my share. Yeah, no doubt. We all have, right? We've all been through something. Everybody has a story.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got a huge story here. I mean, you've grown up in New York, and from what I was reading, I mean, you had kind of like a rough upbringing early on. What made you want to get into acting?
You know, honestly, with all due respect, I don't think I can honestly say that I did. I think when I was a young man, like a lot of young men, I was just confused, and I think that, it was more about identity, just trying to put the pieces back, put myself back together. So I don't know if I can go on like a conventional line of thought and say that, well, yeah, I had this dream, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if it was so much of that. I think that movies, theaters, when I was a kid, because I was on the street a lot, I found myself in movie theaters. And I think the fantasy within the theater, being safe within the kind of setting of almost like a synagogue, a church, it was quiet, and I felt safe there. And I think watching films and just kind of escaping into that world, at that time in my life just seemed like a remedy. But I didn't connect the dots. I didn't see it as a progression into something else. I just saw it as a world, this alternate world that I could just escape into and feel a sense of peace and something that I felt, world I felt safe in.
You just said something there that I never really thought of, where you said it was kind of like very peaceful and just going in there, and I never thought of it like that, like going into a movie theater just to like get peace.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if without going into too much detail, and if you compare it to what some of the tempestuous circumstance that I was in, I think that it was a good way to balance things out for me, because I mean, it was just a place for, it was a way for me to just, I mean, whether it's by chance or I don't know as much as it was my own design. I did not create the circumstance that I was born into. I just found myself, and I'm not necessarily. I don't see it as a victim. I don't stand on any kind of victim consciousness. I don't relate to that. I just know that we're all kind of thrown into the situation. We have to survive, and I think certain situations come up in life where you just find yourself in places, and I think that it was a way. The imagination became a way for me to escape. Imagination, whether I knew it at that time or not, was a tool that later on I would develop to deal with all kinds of challenges in life that we all have. I think imagination is a very powerful tool that can be utilized, and if you can nurture it and or have people that support that, then I think you can do amazing things. If you can change your life, you can change other people's lives. You can inspire people to focus on that. To free them from the mediocrity of their lives or the things that they feel tyrannized by.
Now, I guess it was when you were in high school, a teacher recommended for you to go to try out to go to the New York School of Performing Arts?
Yeah.
What did he see in you to recommend that?
Well, I couldn't really focus in class too much in school. I was moved around a lot when I was a kid, and I just didn't have, I think, I just was always put in the back of the classroom. I was either disrupting class or not in school, and the one place, I think it was in junior high school, that I finally found a teacher who found me, who had a heart for me. She was very sensitive to my needs, and she was just concerned about me because of, what she saw. I think that, and so she suggested I take her acting class. So she was an English teacher, but she taught drama as an elective. And I don't know, I found myself very comfortable around her, and we started doing improvisational type work, scenes, reading plays, etc. And next thing I know, I'm I don't know, I just felt free. I felt that my classmates all of a sudden were affected by what I was doing. I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. It's much that I was just getting very involved with the material, the fantasy of whatever was put in front of me. I would just dive into it and disappear into it, kind of like the way I disappeared into the theater. That became like the alternate reality. And then after in time, I felt like I functioned better within the fantasy of things in reality. And I just saw people reacting to that. I didn't try to affect them as much as I saw the reaction to what I was doing. I said, oh. And then she suggested, I think you should audition for the high school performing arts. And then I just started studying contemporary monologues and getting ready to audition.
Well, it seemed like not only did it have an effect on people, fellow students, but it had a huge effect on yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was cathartic. I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, it was a cathartic experience. I was purging a lot. I think a lot of the conflict that I carried with me, since my adolescent years. A lot of things I observed, around me, I was affected by or impacted by. I think, it was a way for me to release that without even realizing it. I was, channeling a lot of that fear, rage, frustration, confusion about self, identity, all that. So it was a way to kind of duck out or sneak out of what I perceive myself to be and embrace other aspects of character, other aspects of self, and reinvent myself through the fantasy, through the imagination, through the power of the word, through the power of the playwright, whatever's put in front of me. So I could transcend myself. So that's why I don't subscribe so much to culturism. When people ask me, well, what are you? I say, well, I'm Robert. They're like, yeah, but where do you come from? Where I come from doesn't exist anymore, man. The people are all gone. So it's kind of confusing, this notion of identity for me. I'm not knocking culture. I just don't subscribe. I just don't feel like I've ever been able to define myself that way.
How exciting was it for you, though, after when you got your first real acting job? It's surreal,
actually, because I like I said, I didn't plan out to do this. I went in the other direction. When I graduated from performing arts, I went into the Navy. I was in the Navy for 4 years, but I kept in touch with. I still could not get myself off the streets, in the sense that I still, I respected my teachers in performing arts, and actually performing arts was crucial because it helped fine tune, helped me discover my creative self. But there was still a resistance to that. I think because I was 17 years old. You're crazy when you're a teenager, and if you've been impacted by things in your life, and you're not, and you kind of your sense of self has been fragmented. You basically try to put the pieces of yourself together. So you have artists on one side, you have conventional, structured reality on the other, and you try to see where you fit in the midst of this. And I didn't. I just had to kind of create a vertical, this kind of vertical dive and just go deep into an experience between 18 and 22 to discover who I was. Because whether the teachers were I was fortunate, like some young men are fortunate, young women are fortunate to have teachers, people that contribute to their lives and say, listen, you can do anything you want to do. They're positive voices, in comparison to some of the negativity you've been surrounded. So I was fortunate to have those voices. But the greater voice at that time was the voice in my own head. And I think it was an echo from some of the experiences with people I had that were not so positive. And so I still could not break that yoke yet. And I had to go as far out as I could away from anything that people were suggesting, just so I could kind of die, to some extent metaphorically, and be reborn again into realization. And I had to throw myself into an extreme situation, which was the military, because I was getting into a lot of trouble, after high school. So it was either military or prison. The way things were shaping up with some of the situations that I was observing on the street with friends of mine getting into trouble, getting sent away or just dying, getting killed. And so I just realized, I got to figure something out, man. So, I just shipped myself off and kind of just anointed myself a disciplinarian, and I had some drill instructor screaming in my face, and I had to really work on discipline first before I could do anything with my life, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely it does. Now you went on for 4 years in the Navy, but I guess the passion was still there for you to become an actor and to still follow that. So, I mean, for you, if you really think about it, for you to go away for 4 years and then to come out and still want to do that, I mean, you must have really had that passion deep for it.
I think what started happening was I think I get 2 years into service. I think that I started to feel like I was having these dreams, recurring dreams about performing arts. I would see my teacher. I missed some of my classmates. I missed the innocence and some of the experiences I had performing. So I felt, in a sense, I was being haunted by this other aspect of self, this other part of me, And I was, but still fortunate enough to be in contact with one of my teachers at performing arts who reminded me, even while I was, overseas, et cetera, traveling around the world, not to forget the other half of myself, not to forget what he perceived as the artist, And so I think as the years progressed and I realized that I was going to eventually be discharged, I started to consider it as a reality, the possibility of reacquainting myself with myself, and then applying applying that to situations where I could, reacquaint myself with the craft of acting again, and I did. So that was the beginning of it. At least I wasn't still comfortable with the idea, because the truth of it is I never labeled myself. I never considered myself an actor, an artist, and I didn't necessarily communicate the language of the artist. I didn't always feel that I could. I was a street. I don't know. I guess I was a street guy, And so here I am performing in tights, with actors dancing around and trying to find some kind of frame of reference. And there was a part of me that could relate, but there was a part of me that was still resisting that, So.
Hey, but again, you've done it. I mean, you're doing it still. So I mean, that's something to really be proud of yourself with, and it sounds like you're really happy that you're doing it.
Well, I tell you what, I know I'll be honest with you this much, because I'm not tuned into pop culture that much. I don't really know what the heck is going on. I mean, I watch a lot of classic films. With respect to all the artists out there, I'm not dissing anybody. That's just the truth about it. I draw a lot of inspiration from the golden age of Hollywood and classic films and film noir and independent films, et cetera. But yeah, I think here's the short version, is that if anybody would have told me that I would have made it to 50 years old, I never would have believed it. If anybody would have told me I would have made it to 30 years old, I wouldn't believe it. So I think my life itself is a testament to victory, in that I wasn't destroyed by my own hand or somebody else's, and the fact that I could be creative and embrace the creative process and be effective and affect others who say, "Hey, Robert, thank you so much. I feel more secure myself because, you got a bunch of tattoos and you're not afraid to express that communication in an art form or take risks within the art itself, within the work itself." So, yeah, I feel very fortunate that I've been able to affect some people. I've been able to make a living at this, and so, yeah, I mean, I would never believe that I would have lived this long, or that I'd be speaking to a gentleman like yourselves who appreciate what I do and have allowed me the forum to communicate that.
Now, speaking about your tattoos, how old were you when you got your first tattoo?
I just turned 17, I think. Yeah.
Did you think you would become all tatted up like you are today?
No, I didn't. I remember that, the tattoo for me, I mean, then I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that a lot of the guys I was friendly with, he was a way to, I don't know, they were a way for me to communicate identity to myself,
sure.
and also a method to deal with conflict and rage. And so I think that a lot of the young men that were around me were just as confused as I was, and also, we were brothers in spirit. We never labeled ourselves. It wasn't like a gang. We weren't gang members. I saw them as friends and family. We were all born into adversity. In the households that we all lived in, we were filled with ridicule and aggression. So there's all this emotional, psychological, and physical violence that just kind of pushed us out into the streets, right? So here we are in the streets, and I think a lot of us felt disenfranchised and robbed of our lives, even at that age. And so the tattoo and the permanence of the tattoo, I think, was a way to bond us all together. Without all the trappings or the exploits of what Hollywood does with that whole subculture in movies,
right.
glorifying violence and gangs and stuff. For us, it was just a way to find unity, a family, a sense of belonging, and to express that, and the tattoo couldn't be taken away. And so in that sense, it was kind of like a middle finger up to society that we felt beaten up and beaten down by. We were going to take a stand, whether it was on the corner, in the parks, on the street, and lay claim to that. And so in that sense, I felt like, wow. People would say, what are you doing this? Why are you tattooing yourself? You're so young. You're going to ruin your life. I'm like, no, man, this is the one thing that you can't take from me. This is mine. And so that's how it started. I had no idea it was going to be this, like, spiritual allegory, in the sense that it was a way for me to communicate on a much higher level, different aspects of my life, and document it as I traveled, in life experience. Each tattoo had this was symbolized that journey for me. I had no idea, that would be the case. It was an evolution that occurred, I think prior to birth, and that, not to sound like too esoteric about it, but it's just, I felt that the tattoos were already there. They just had to manifest in the flesh. You know what I mean? So it just had to come out. Everything that was in it had to come to the flesh to some extent.
Now, I have nowhere near as many tattoos as you, but
I'll lend you a few, man. I got enough for everybody. It's okay.
Let me relate tattoos now to a movie theater, like you talked about. I know when I get tattooed, it's very relaxing and calming. Do you find when you would get tattooed, do you find peace in that, kind of like when you would go to a movie theater when you were younger?
Yeah, I think that both would trigger an opportunity to embrace this meditative state that you're talking about. I think if I can, I think, it was a form of meditation. I just didn't know it, So movies. To sit in that chair, to transcend the pain, to move beyond the body to some extent, and have this kind of, experience, this almost spiritual-like experience. Yeah, so I feel that, that would be a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Do you think you get almost stereotyped in the roles because of the tattoos a lot of times?
Well, I don't have that perception. That perception is out there, and people, I think there's the tendency to look at it like that. But I think for me, I kind of see myself in the gray area. I'm not on the right side or the wrong side. I have to remove judgment from the equation, the condemning mind, so that I can give my characters humanity. It's kind of like, say you're sitting in a car, right? And a policeman stops you and comes over to you. And even if you're innocent, these days with what's occurring in certain places, you don't necessarily, when you see the badge, I think the average individual, the average citizen wouldn't necessarily see a good guy or their favorite television show policeman. They're like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. They might get frightened. So I don't know if, I guess my point is ultimately is that I don't see life as black and white. I don't see people that way. I think people are very complicated. Whatever costume or uniform they're wearing, whatever value they support or represent, there's a lot of cracks in all this, So I guess I see my characters saying, I try to find humanity in them, because I think the guy who's perceived as being the bad guy, or the guy with the tattoos, or the person that's misfitted, all this, I don't know if they necessarily see themselves as the bad guy. They may look out to the world and say, man, things are really crazy. I don't understand any of this. So in that sense, they make others as bad guys, or basically people that are not sympathetic to who they are, how they communicate, and the way they go about it. So I think in that sense you got to be careful because we all have like very special different needs outside the conventional traditional framework. We're not all the same. But if we establish this false sense of normality, then you start to pick off the people who deviate from that, and then then they're the ones who are the problem. When in fact that attitude, I think, is the problem. So we got to be careful. I think how we look at this. We don't have to be, but I challenge myself to look beyond the artifice into the heart of the matter. So I mean, there's good guys or people that support the law who've done terrible things. There have been men who have been perceived as the bad guy. I'm going to read a passage from one of my favorite authors, Charles Bukowski. He wrote, "I like being picked out as one of the bad guys. I like to feel bad. Anybody could be a good guy. That didn't take guts. Dillinger had guts. Ma Barker was a great woman, teaching those guys how to operate a submachine gun. I didn't want to be like my father. He only pretended to be bad. When you're bad, you didn't pretend. It was just there. I liked being bad. Trying to be good made me sick." Now, I'm not advocating a theology around it. I read that in this book I'm reading called Ham on Rye, and it blew my. It was for me. When I read that passage, like wow, and I get that. So, wow. And these guys, these iconic figures throughout history, people kind of in some way, I dare say, romanticize the outlaw, the gangster, the hero, the one who, because I think in some way they're projecting their own frustration about what they perceive as the hypocrisy of society, and I think some of them want to challenge the bosses, challenge the corporate bureaucracy, which is a lot of the time just crushes, humanity. So I think that in that sense they're rooting for the outlaw, or they're rooting for anyone who stands up and takes risks and challenges the system because they know it's not always fair, So in that sense, I think that, a hero can be born. Not everybody's quick to subscribe to that because it shakes some of the moral foundation, some of the religious, I think, framework too. If you get, so you got to be careful with that too. So I'm not advocating that everybody, become an outlaw and go out there and do it like, Charles Bronson style and Death Wish, and just start going after. I just think that people respect anyone or people that's stand up and not afraid to challenge something that they feel is an injustice, whether through word, through poetry, through art. I think in that sense, art can be useful. Controversy can be useful.
Well, I mean, and actually too, like over recent years, with the whole tattoo thing, tattoos have become so mainstream where before it would be natural for a person to be covered in tattoos. They would think he's going to be the villain or the bad guy, where now they're so mainstream that it would be like now he would be the good guy. Yeah,
that's another thing. I tell you, if anybody would have told me, 35, 40 years ago that would be the case, I never would have believed that. And so it's an interesting point that you raise, and it's also a relief for me because it's taken off some of the burden. It's taken a lot of the burden off of me. I can walk down the street now and see young ladies, young men from all walks of life, basically, expressing themselves that way. And in a sense, I've become like, in a way, I've almost, I don't know, I feel almost somewhat, I don't know, just almost, I wouldn't say normal. I would just say that I'm, I don't know, conventional compared to some of the things some of the forms of expression that are out there, which are really courageous and admirable. But I almost feel like a rookie in regard to that exploration. I'm like, wow, So it's really, really amazing. And the media, like you say, has also embraced it too, and is not afraid to communicate that. So that's for me, it's amazing, and it's also it's a relief. I never would have believed it.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Let me ask you a question as far as acting and some of the roles. Because of the unique experience that you have in your life, do you find it hard when you're playing a quote-unquote villainous role to people that live the kind of lifestyle that we're talking about? They tend to see the humanity even in people that would, from the outside look like villains. So do you have a hard time putting just, quote-unquote a face of evil on that? Or do you think you're successful because you realize that despite in this context they're evil, they still go home to people that love them and that there's emotional depth to these characters?
I don't want to sound redundant, but I will say that it's very important for me to remove judgment. I know this.
Right.
If I look at a script, if I look at a perception in words that's been constructed by someone who has a lack of experience or at least sees things a certain way, I mean, they can control what you say, but not what you think. So I can read the material. I can meditate on it. I can continue to meditate on and then manifest what people perceive as character, the incarnation, this kind of psychic Ouija board that I conjure and channel through these thoughts. Some of them I can recognize because I've had similar experience. Some of them I don't. This is where the art form comes into play. It's an as if. You have to imagine a circumstance and make it and believe in it, like a faith, so much so that it actually becomes your reality. We vibrate like that. Your psyche vibrates like that. So, to me, there's no. I can't even. I don't know if there's even a reference point for it. I know that some of the when I go deep like that, I know there is residual. Like you have to. That's why it's important to remove judgment, because when you're done, you can't evaluate yourself. All you can do is hope that the people that hired you appreciate that you were effective and that you were also to ring the bell creatively for yourself. And then just let it go. I release it, and it's not always easy. I mean, some of the stuff it permeates because it's their characters. They're dealing with a tortured disposition. They're in extreme circumstance. There's violence that's involved, psychological violence, and I think that it can be difficult. At least for me, it's been difficult at times to separate that from my personal life, especially when in society, I think I'm finding more and more people or audiences are having difficulty or challenge, but they can't always differentiate the persona and character between the individuals. So sometimes people, I think, get confused when they meet me, and I'm not a talking monkey. I can have because the characters aren't always written in such a way to communicate intelligence. I give them intelligence, I dare say, through the way I manifest. Like I said, they control what I say, but not what I think. In that sense, it's the nuance of character, the way I do things. It's what I don't say, I dare say, that communicates effectively, not so much the power of the word, unless I'm given an opportunity to do that. If that's not the case, then I will find intelligence. I will find something to legitimize that character, whatever it is. So.
Now, do you find yourself at all struggling as far as the characters that you play versus, the not wanting to say, like, glorify violence or glorify, gangland behavior or something like that? Or is it more of just, that is part of the actual life and, you're just portraying part of that?
Well, I think given some of the recent experiences I've had, it's the antithesis of glory. And I think this is where I feel, and I dare say this, that some of the audiences and people that appreciate what I do are sympathetic.
Right.
Because I think that they don't necessarily, because it's almost this idea of the underdog, this guy who's this individual that's continually going up against a situation where the odds are stacked up against him. Whether he did something wrong, that's part of the equation, but if the wrong that's done to him is greater than what he's done, then the jury, sometimes comes to, at least the jury of my peers sometimes feel like, it feels like as if I find them rooting for that opportunity for me to, like in my own life, to move beyond the circumstance within the fiction and transcend it. Even if it involves something violent, because at the end of the day, I think that if there's something in it where you feel that what the character's doing, what I brought to this character, there's a humanity there, and there's a sense of remorse or realization that he's been kind of bamboozled, trapped in a circumstance. And I think that all the people in the world that feel misfitted, that feel misunderstood, see that there may still be some resistance to those in power that delegate the power, who decide who gets chosen to do this, that are going, why is this particular person, this persona, this image, this guy that looks like this or that, the other thing, why is he continually being puppeted in this mythology this way? Why isn't he allowed to communicate his intelligence? Why is so in that sense, the mythology that they've created for me, it kind of turns around and bites itself on the butt, because if I keep showing up in this condition, this situation, but I continue to transcend it somehow because a director or a writer says, you know what, let's do it a little bit different this time. Let's show a little bit more humanity. Let's show you struggle with this conflict to the point where everybody can relate to that, but has maybe pulled the reins in it at the crucial moment where your character went a little bit further and now has to pay the price. So in that sense, I think is the tragic aspect. But prior to that, I think that people can relate to the friction within the self that they all have. And good people do bad things all the time. They find themselves caught up in the system because they made a bad choice on the wrong day, and now their lives have changed forever. Or they were done an injustice because someone profiled them, and now their lives have changed. Or they were called to go to war and kill people. And they're like, oh, my God, how do I live with this? How do I go back to my wife and kids? How do I start over? So people from all walks of life are thrown into situations that don't always add up. 2 + 2 = 5, like Orwell communicated in his theology. So it's in that sense, I think I find that I have a lot of company and affection given to me because people understand that it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray in the world, in Hollywood, in the storytelling, and what I've been chosen and what they've allowed me to do. People aren't that stupid. They see it, I dare say, even if it's not necessarily spelled out for them.
Right.
Now, how about one of your early movies that you got to do was you got to work with Steven Seagal on Out for Justice. What was it like working with Steven Seagal?
Steven, for me, that was a pivotal point in my life. He's a gentleman. He's a sweetheart. In that if he likes you. And he took an affection to me, and I was going through a difficult time when we were making that film. And he's a great man. I really admired him, and I was fortunate enough to work with him. I did 2 films with him. I did a film called Hard to Kill, which is the first time I met Steven. I auditioned for him, and he just came right out and said to me some really nice things. He complimented me at the audition, and most, people in that position, at that level, don't. Somebody smile at you, good work, thank you, and, on to the next thing. He actually took the time to speak to me with respect and gave me compliments. He hired me. And then when we were working on Hard to Kill, he said to me, listen, Robert, I got this film coming up. It's about a bunch of guys, et cetera, in Brooklyn, and I want you to be in this film. So, thank you very much, but, I had been accustomed to this a lot. And so even though he was nice to me, I wasn't going to hold him to it. But a year later, he contacted me. His people contacted me, and I got hired to be in another film with him called Out for Justice. So he's a man of his word. He was nice to me. He's great at what he does. I enjoyed watching him work. I'm a big fan of his martial arts and his persona that he carries, and the way all the stuff that he's done. And he also is a good friend because, like I said, I was going through some personal stuff in my life, and he was there for me. He said, if you need me, and we're not going into any of the gory details, but if you need me, I'm there, man. Just call up one of my people and we'll handle this for you. So he's treated me better than what people would call family members. He was, in that particular time in my life, was like a father to me.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Now, what part did you play in Hard to Kill?
I think he's a character that comes in and I fight. I just, I think just some assailant that come in to do something, mischievous with guns and stuff, and I face off with Steve, and I try to stab him to death or something like that. And he just puts a few moves on me in a very violent, dynamic fashion. It's pretty cool.
See, now I have to go back and watch that movie now. I love that movie. That was just a classic movie. I remember the first time I saw that, a buddy of mine's like, you got to see this movie. And I was just like, I really didn't want to, and then I watched it, and now it's one of them like guilty pleasure movies. Like every time it's on, I have to watch it.
Yeah. I know, man. I'm glad that you appreciate the film and guilty pleasures, man. I know there's certain films that just they make history, you know.
Yeah.
They stand the test of time. I appreciate film like that. It's inspiring. Yeah.
Now, how about Death Race? What was it like doing that? That must have been a fun movie.
Death Race, yeah, was exciting. That was like, you know, I felt like I was a little kid again because they set up, you know, the special effects with that was very elaborate. So I think for some of the sequences when the cars were flipping over, they had me like in this giant gyroscope. They put a car in this gyroscope and they spun it around with cameras rigged to it while I was in the car. So you know, like when you go to these, you know, state-of-the-art amusement parks and you're flipping upside down, going round and round, and you know, upside down. That's what it was like. They put me they strapped me in, and they spun the car around with the cameras. And I thought, wow, this is different. I've never done this before. You know, I've done simulation parachute jumping, you know, blue screen, but there was no blue screen. They actually put me in this contraption. It looked like it belonged in like one of the theme parks, where I was upside down, strapped in, and they flipped the car in circles. This gigantic gyroscope. It was amazing.
No kidding. How about working with Jason Statham and like Tyrese Gibson?
Jason and I like Tyrese right off the bat because, you know, I think some of his background I can appreciate, and he just talked to me straight, and I talked to him straight, so there was no confusion about where we stood. So I appreciated that because I don't really, you know, subscribe to some of the, you know, the nonsense, you know. So
right.
Really nice. I just appreciated that he, you know, he understood me. And Jason is another gentleman. I introduced myself to him. He smiled at me. He shook my hand. We didn't really speak a whole lot, but sometimes, you know, you can talk, and you don't really connect. And this guy, man, the way he looked at me, it's usually in the eyes, you know. I can tell. The way he looked at me, he just had this charming smile, and he shook my hand, and he bowed his head, and that was enough for me, man. And I'd see him on the set, I'd say hi, he'd say hi back, and, you know, small talk here and there, but he was really just, the vibe I got from him was just a gentleman and very respectful and humble.
That's how he seems like in all the parts he plays in his movie. Like kind of just a very quiet, honest type person. Speaks when he needs to speak, and that's it. Yeah. And Tyrese just seems like a very nice, fun guy. Yeah,
he like I said, you know, I was in good company. I felt that the people that, you know, the guys that were around me, they got it. You know, you don't have to, you know, the less you have to explain yourself, the better, man. In that sense, you know, as far as, you know, that people just get it. Kind of like, it's just nice. It's just nice to be in the presence of other men like this, especially given the kind of subject matter, you know, in this film, and the cars trying to kill one another. So, you know, we better get along, you know, and find a way to appreciate, have fun with that, you know. So, yeah.
It's a shame. I mean, to show the true type of person that Tyrese is, I don't know if you had seen with the recent accident that killed Paul Walker when Tyrese went out to the crash site. I mean, he just broke down in tears, and I felt so bad for the guy. I mean, you saw the true person in him. I mean, the emotion that just overcome with losing a friend. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's horrible, man. It's tragic. I don't even like to look at, you know, when there are accidents, you know, when I'm in LA and I see accidents, I don't even want to look at them because I just think it's bad mojo. I feel, you know, I mean, I don't even have words to really, I feel like if I say anything, you know, all I can say is I feel really terrible about what happened, and I hope people just, you know, I don't know, I'm not an expert, you know, when it comes to, you know, physics, man. I just know that sometimes, you know, we just got to be, you know, we all got to be really careful, you know, in our environment, and that's all I know. Is you never know what's going to happen in this life. So, you know, not that you have to walk around paranoid, you know, looking over your shoulder every second about, you know, looking at, you know, for safes falling out of buildings and stuff, but you can be taken so quickly, and I think this is why people are shocked, because I think sometimes we see certain people and we think they're impervious, you know, and they're immortal, and then when something happens, you know, like, for example, Michael Jackson, you know, for some people, you know, most people, like this iconic figure, godlike, and left the planet so early. I think it shocked a lot of people. You know, I know it did. It shocked the world. So I think it's just, in some degree, it's the same thing with this young man being taken so quickly like that, and the way he was taken too, I think is also bizarre. So I think, maybe it's a reality check on some level for all of us to look at ourselves and go, well, man, you never know, and anybody can be taken in any circumstance, whether being careful, whether you're, not necessarily in control of the circumstance. Life ultimately says, okay, time to go, and you're like, well, no, I don't want to, and not like this. So it's arbitrary a lot of the times, and it's unjust. It would seem from the outward perspective of people who care about the individual and love the individual that's been taken. They're like, why? I mean, look at war has taken so many people. So it's another tragedy. It's one of those things that just occurs, and people are like, wow. I'm just grateful. Like I said, I'm grateful that that it doesn't happen that more often, because so many. So I'm just.
It's scary.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. How about the role that I really got to know you from? This might catch you off guard, but General Hospital.
Oh yeah.
I grew up watching General Hospital when I was like 5 years old, and I watched it for years. And your character on there, I mean, it was just so you were such the perfect villain bad guy. It used to drive me nuts, and I used to wait. When's he going to get his day? When's he going to get his day? And then when it finally came, and then they brought you back as the twin brother. That's the beauty of soap operas.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was quite an experience. It was surreal for me, that whole experience. I mean, it was a lot. I mean, I tell you this much. I learned quickly to have tremendous respect for the soap opera actors, because they have to get under their belt a tremendous amount of dialogue in a very short amount of time. Sometimes the same day you're given pages to read. I mean, paragraphs to memorize. Or forget about memorize. I don't know how you do it. You learn very quickly to assimilate the information and communicate it. So I gained a tremendous respect for them, and it's just for that alone.
Yeah, and that's something like a lot of times people don't give soap opera actors respect, where you would think they should get more respect, because they are doing, so much, and they're doing a daily show compared to a once-a-week show or a movie, where they're doing exactly what you said with so much dialogue day in and day out.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not afforded, take after take after take to fine-tune it to get it, what some people would perceive as perfect. You have to move on, because, the clock is ticking, and you got to move on to the next setup. So they're not afforded that luxury, like you said, with film and some of the TV shows that have given, some time, even though they're moving at a fast pace too. They have I think a lot more leverage based on my experience. Daytime is moving in. From what I remember, they were knocking out 3 shows per day. Forget about taking an entire week to film one episodic show for a series, a primetime series. They were knocking out 3 shows a day.
Wow.
Think about it. Yeah, how quickly they're moving, and how quickly they got to be on point. Because there's a lot of eyeballs on that, right? So
yeah,
they got to make the grade. They got to ring the bell. They got to do their best. So yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you this, Ben. The first time that I remember really sort of sitting up and taking notice was definitely. It's kind of a messed up story, but my wife basically was telling me about Nip Tuck, and she had watched the pilot episode and I hadn't, and she's like, but you'll never guess who the bad guy is, and I'm like, who? And she's like, the skinny tattooed gang member. I'm like, no way, we love that guy. And at the time, nobody really I didn't know your name and stuff like that, but we had seen you in so much before. But then when I watched Nip Tuck, there was something. And this kind of, I guess, goes back to what I was asking earlier. Despite the fact that your character was definitely a villain, I mean, he was hands down the bad guy, especially during the first season. What you brought to the character, though, was, even though he would have killed them in an instant, there was this underlying friendship and comedy and sort of real life aspect to you're not Darth Vader. You weren't just going to stand there hovering over people, but it really sort of came through as far as I was concerned, the emotional depth of a character that could have been sort of a very one-dimensional, quote unquote gang member.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad. Well, great. Thank you. I appreciate that compliment. And I don't even know what to attribute it to. I mean, there's so many factors. I mean, you got to keep in mind Ryan Murphy was at the helm of that show. Obviously, you know that, right? So, I mean, so the writing that was provided to me, plus the apparatus itself. I mean, there were so many variables that came into play aside from just my ability. So many of the other hands that were in that pot. Creating this, this groundbreaking experience. This has not been repeated. So I think, I probably, it was my ability meeting a great opportunity, I'm glad that I'm fortunate that I was allowed that experience and able to meet such talent like that, so those what you just described could be communicated, within the within the character, so that I could explore some of the comedy that you talk about, and not necessarily being a Nazi, this overlord, this kind of, this
right.
This ruthless, executor of violence. But you saw some traces of humanity. You saw this playful nature within the character, which just made it scary but fun to watch at the same time. So you saw this combination of elements that obviously work, because it's bizarre, because people are affected by it to this day. They're still talking about it. And I had no way of knowing any of this. In fact, when I was doing it, I didn't even know what I was doing, other than what I've always done, which is take my work very seriously, study my work, and listen to my director, ask questions and listen to the answers, and then do my best. And then you just hope, with anything, whether it's nip tuck, movies, independent films, studio stuff, you really never know how things are going to turn out, so you can't really get attached to your work. You just got to get attached to the creative process, get involved in the creative process. And the next thing you know, something happens and it clicks for reasons you don't know, and people are going crazy over it, and you're going, wow. And so in that sense, for me, it's almost surreal, because I'm like, wow, I didn't realize I was making that kind of impact, because when we were doing it, we didn't think that. We're just trying to do our best, as always, and then it becomes this thing that has this shelf life. It becomes perennial. It just keeps going. It doesn't end. The new generations, young kids are discovering, people are discovering just now, like, hey, I just saw this,
Right.
But just now getting the series, I've been traveling abroad to Europe to do films and stuff these days, and some countries haven't even seen the series yet, hasn't even got there yet. So it just keeps regenerating, recreating itself over and over again, which is kind of nice, So.
How about your the times on VIP working with Pam Anderson and the girls?
Well, you've done your, I respect you, brother. You did your homework. I think you know my resume better than I do. Wow. That was, that was aesthetically wonderful. Visually, I had a great time. The people that I worked with are nice. I had to give them a lot of love. It was exciting to meet Tommy Lee. One of the episodes that I appeared in was with Tommy Lee when they were together, Pam and Tommy Lee.
Nice.
They were both nice. But Tommy was very approachable, and we were, obviously comparing notes on our tattoos and stuff, and he was showing me his work and telling me where he'd gotten, various artwork, and I was showing him mine. It was really nice. It felt at home there, And
that's awesome.
One of the writers and stuff, and he was, Steve Kazier. He was very nice, and so it's a nice experience.
Now, how about again going back to the tattoos? Two shows that I think of off the bat, and I think to myself, were you ever approached to be on either of these shows? And one would be the old HBO show Oz, and the other one would be the big hit that's out there now, Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, I remember Oz. I don't know if I was ever called in to meet with the producers on that show. So the answer is no. I would know that. So I don't recall that I was ever even asked to come in to meet with anybody. I don't know if it was. What year was that series on? Do you remember the year?
Oz was, I guess, 10 years ago?
Okay.
Oz was 97.
Yeah, I know it was on. I know it was very popular, and I remember people talking about it, and I remember people saying kind of the same thing you're saying. Hey, have you been asked to be on the show? Have you? And for whatever reason, because the business is very bizarre in that sense. You're doing stuff, and you don't always know. Like I said, it's a business that's a bit ambiguous when it comes to job positions and why people are where they're at. And I'm not saying it's nefarious or anything. I just Tito, like I said, once again, with every every athlete, every artist, and every gambler knows that 2 + 2 = 5, because some things just don't make sense. Like, people continually ask me about Sons of Anarchy. Hey, how come you're not on the show? How come you're not on the show? Like, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if the show's over yet. Maybe I'll be in the last season. I don't know.
Right.
There's this Prison Break. Even people said to me, "Hey, that show's perfect for you. How come you?" And so, the same could be said. People might be asking some other actor, like, "Hey, how come you weren't on Nip Tuck? How come you weren't on, a lot of the shows
right.
I do?" So, who knows? I mean, it is what it is. Things happen for a reason, and you have to be grateful for things that occur. But I've observed, like I said, when I spoke to you earlier in the conversation, I mentioned that I'm really not tuned into pop culture. So I hear stuff from my friends, other artists, or people just say stuff to me. Or people on the street say, "Hey, man, did you see this show? You should be on. Or were you on this show? I think you were on this show." So sometimes I feel like I've been on these shows. They're like, "Hey, I saw you in Prison Break, man. I saw you in Sons of Anarchy, right?" I'm like, "No, I haven't been on those shows." So I think the collective consciousness is like they projected me onto that show. So sometimes I feel like I'm on the show without the benefit of actually being on the show. So I don't know what that means.
That's funny.
But do you think though that that's because so much of the stuff that you have done has later on went on to be part of pop culture? I mean, just looking at like your television resume, everything from NYPD Blue all the way down to stuff like The Ghost Whisperer and stuff. Those are all sort of very pop culture like television. So it does sort of put you out there in that world.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, it definitely lends to that perception, without a doubt. I agree with you. Yeah, I can see that. So yeah, I can see that.
Now, you have a lot of stuff in the works, and one of the things that I saw, and I cringed when I saw this, but you're going to be in the Human Centipede 3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that movie?
I hope first of all, I hope I'm not giving you a headache.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. Yeah. Because first of all, I just want to give respect to the forum. So I tend to philosophize. I'm not the most conventional-minded person. So but if you allow me the platform, I'll go for it. I think that.
Yeah, no, go for it. Go. We're enjoying it.
Yeah. I think to answer your question about Centipede, I think obviously it's a controversial. The series is extremely controversial, to say the least. But then, see, here's the thing. Here's the where I come in. I've been associated, I think, with controversy throughout my whole career. For example, the tattoos, right? Like you were talking about the tattoos earlier.
Right.
A lot of times I'd show up at casting calls, or even be on movie sets, and I'd catch a lot of flack because of the ink. People would say things to me that weren't very nice, or they at times attribute the work that I was getting to because I had tattoos, and so, or I wouldn't get hired for certain roles because of the tattoos. Or on NYPD Blue, Nick, I think you brought up NYPD Blue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they covered tattoos on my neck in one of the episodes, so they worked with me. Yeah, it was interesting. So I mean, I've been surrounded by this kind of chatter, years ago. It's not as much these days because, like you said, mainstream is embracing the subculture. It's not even a subculture anymore. The art form so much that it doesn't seem to be as much of a big deal when I first started. So when fellow actors or people said to me, "Hey man, I got some bad news for you. Actors don't have tattoos. Good luck. You're never going to play this. You're never going to play that. You're never going to play a sympathetic character. You're never going to be like, kind of like the character on Ghost Whisperer that you mentioned. He's a sympathetic. He did some terrible things, but he was a sympathetic character and begging for forgiveness, right? I think.
Right.
The episode. So I've had experiences where, regardless of all the experts in the course of doom and gloom from people I met that said, you're not, this is the limitation, and this is going to be the scope, the range of what you're going to do, then I find myself in situations doing things that I never imagined I would be doing, like on a soap opera, despite the character of Manny or the nefarious possibilities of Father Mateo. I'm on a soap opera with the pretty people, the plight of the pretty people, with respect to them. So, and so I think that was shocking to people alone, to see somebody who looked like I do, non-conventional, in a very conventional setting with very, attractive people. So that in itself is a controversy, right? Wow, what's this guy? Did they look like he grabbed him from, Pelican Bay or, Sing Sing? What the hell is he doing on the set of General Hospital, man? But it worked, didn't it? It worked. So to bring this full circle back to your question about Centipede, Tom Six he's the controversial king right now in that regard, in this genre of filmmaking. So to me, it's apropos. It's an appropriate marriage between him and I. He contacted me, and I think that his controversy makes sense to me, and I'll tell you why. I think to be a part of a controversy can be useful because it demonstrates a resistance to conventional thinking, like what's safe. He's definitely shown that he's not afraid to challenge that. So if you when you tear things down so you can rebuild something else, ideally it's great, especially if what you build challenges the minds within the collective, the audience, and so you can stir people up. I mean, they don't necessarily have to agree with what you're doing, but at least, they're awake to have their attention. So I think, art in that sense ultimately is designed to trigger feelings you never knew you had, or perhaps you forgot about them. So whether you agree with his mythology or his particular approach to storytelling, because I think this third one, it's very different than the other two, despite what people think, because it's 100% politically incorrect. That's the tagline for Centipede 3. Now, being involved in this film, and obviously I had to sign a letter, what do they call them, a disclosure agreement. I can't really talk about it too much, but I will tell you this. I watched the first two, and I was frightened by them. Not so much because of the apparatus, which is very, barbaric and violent, or some of the things that were communicated that were hard for people to stomach. I get that. But I think his films, I dare say, are more of social political commentary, especially this third one. And he's putting up a mirror, I think, for everyone to look at. And we're not always comfortable with our reflections. I think everyone has seen something ugly, has something ugly to deal with in their past or present life. So, things we keep secret about ourselves. I think in that sense, I feel the films, are dealing with that. I think, so. A lot of us feel like we're slaves to a system of government that has us on our knees swallowing rhetoric fed to us by media, right? And then there's violence. And so I think the apparatus that Tom uses needs to be barbaric to expose the primal nature of humanity in extremes, especially with this third one, because I read it. And I wouldn't sign on to do something if I felt that I was going to, just be part of this what's looked at as a formula that he created that was shocking. It's never been done before. This film, I dare say, is very different than the other two. It's violent, yes, and he pushes the boundaries again, but it doesn't necessarily focus on the centipede. It's like taking a trip back into the Dark Ages, into the 15th century or 13th century, and exploring that within the prison system. And as we all know, like you guys know, I've been very acquainted to that mythology, so I think it's very appropriate that we put two heretics together, Tom Six and me, because I'm basically the lawbreaker, aren't I? Or at least within the art form I am. I haven't broke the law since I was a kid. I've walked a straight line. So it seems a good marriage from what I can see, or an appropriate marriage given what I've been allowed to do in Hollywood, or allowed to do, period. And so I think that Tom is fearless in that regard. You may not agree with his particular approach to storytelling or what he's doing. Some people might even consider it, there's been extreme reaction to what he's created, but there's also been extreme reaction to me. If I remember in the early days, people laughing at me or mocking me or I getting into fistfights at auditions because of the way that I looked. So when I consider my history and I consider what Tom's going up against, I can appreciate him.
So you would get into fistfights at auditions?
Yeah. I'm not a tough guy. There's a lot of guys that are a lot bigger than me. They could probably kick my butt, but I just, after a while, you get tired of showing up at auditions, and sometimes some artists aren't always friendly, and for whatever reasons I don't understand, they can be rude and say things that are inappropriate. I don't know why. Maybe they're trying to prove something to themselves. Maybe who knows, they're insecure, or maybe they just figure they can, maybe they're working out their character or something. And after a while, you need to deal with that. But sometimes, somebody catches you on a bad day, and they put their hands on you, then find yourself in a situation, man. So I'm not proud of that, but at the same time, there's only so much you can take after a while.
Sure. Sure.
And I don't support that behavior. I sit down with a sheriff who gave me a little bit of a lecture. He said, Robert, I appreciate what you did, and I can respect what you did and everything, but listen, next time, you may want to, just turn, offer the other cheek kind of a thing, So, but it was tough when the guy put his hands on me, after I told him, please, will you just leave me alone? Because I'd run into the same guy over and over at auditions, and he would just pick on me and make fun of the ink. See that guy with all the tattoos? And so I let it go after a while because I felt sorry for him. I'm like, wow, he must really be, have some really insecure or I don't know what the issue was, but I tried to be as diplomatic as I could till the day he caught me on the wrong day, and and then it became something. But ironically, the producers knew me, the writer knew me, they all knew me. So they said, well, LaSardo didn't start that fight. And then the next thing I know, I got hired to be on that episode, despite what happened. Because I called my manager, I think I'm going to go, the cops are after me. I think I'm going to probably get locked up. Because what do you mean? I went to an audition. I got into a fight. Some guy lost some of his teeth. I was punching, next thing I know, I'm in a fight. I'm on top of him, and all this stuff's going on. And I got out of there before the cops came, et cetera. And then I think I really screwed up, man. He goes, let me make some phone calls. We can see what the deal is, And I was called back in to meet with the director a couple of days later. I thought, well, the cop's going to be waiting for me there, What's the deal? But it got squashed. I was fortunate that the guy that I had the altercation with was very forgiving and understanding, and we moved on, and I got hired to play that role regardless of what happened, because the director at the time, who knew me, I guess knew me better than what people perceived me to be, and I got a pass, man. I got lucky. But I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't support that behavior in any situation, because it just gets you put in prison, man, or get you, you in court paying a lot of money,
Yeah.
Broke. So.
Now, there's something else we found out about you, and let's see if I was told by one of our past guests, who's an author, when he heard that you were coming on the show, he said, you got to make sure you ask Robert about his poetry, that he's an incredible poet.
Oh, that's sweet. Wow. Well, you kind of caught me off guard with that one.
We did our homework, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. Who's the? I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't mention names or anything, but whoever that gentleman is, tell him thank you. I appreciate his compliment. It's a huge compliment, because I feel like I'm in the infant stage to that form of communication. Within the last couple of years, I've explored writing. I mean, I've been writing. Apparently, I've been writing for years. I just throw the stuff away because I just needed to get it out. But within the last few years, I started putting a collection of poems together, combining it with visual art, having someone take photographs of my tattoos and communicate the thought, the spirit, the feeling behind the imagery, so people would understand. And it was more of a response, guys, I think, to people saying, "Hey, man, what does this mean? Like, what's the through line? What's the theme behind your ink, man? What are you saying with this? Because So I said, okay, let me answer this question. Let me communicate, this allegory, this poetic imagery in words, So I started writing about it.
That's awesome. That's almost, and it's also kind of like a form of therapy too, I guess, to really open up and get your feelings out.
Yeah, it's cathartic, absolutely. It helped me get through some really dark times. I think anybody, from all walks of life, have to express themselves through sports or whatever people do to express themselves. So I write. So I've been finding that writing is very therapeutic. And you were talking also earlier about, sitting in the chair, getting tattooed, and what that's like. It's also cathartic. You're releasing something. You're going through this experience. It doesn't have to be a torturous experience. It can be liberating depending on how you approach it, right? So I think writing also has that same kind of orgasmic, creatively orgasmic feeling. You're releasing something that's pent up within inside you, and you're getting it out. And I think whether it be the ink from the pen to the paper or the ink in the skin, you're providing you're opening up doors to release stuff, to get it out. Whether in images or within the power of the word, communicating the word, and with the hopes that someone might be affected by it in the sense that you can help other people who are just as confused as you are, or feel just as misfitted as you are, and are having a similar life experience, whether they carry the ink inside them or they wear it on their skin, they can relate. And so you want to give back. You want to share a piece of yourself, especially when people are saying, "Hey, man, what does this mean?" So I felt like I had a responsibility to communicate and put that into the world, because obviously, as we've communicated, there's a specific mythology that has me, kind of labeled from a particular point of view. And I thought, well, let me share something different. Let me do something that's also creative, because I'm not going to demonize my work. I'm just going to say, well, let me increase on this experience and share a variation of this communication in my own way. Let me write the script. Let me write it in my own words and see if it can be effective, or at least forget about being effective, because that's vanity and me seeking myself. Let's see if I can help some other people come through what I went through, and maybe not have it be so tempestuous, so dangerous, maybe it could save some people from that, from banging, from that kind of head banging their heads against the wall,
right,
or doing something to hurt themselves.
Nice. So what things do you have coming up in the future for us? We have Human Centipede and whatever.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, brother? You just broke up a little bit. What was the question?
What other things do you have coming up besides Human Centipede?
I was in Lithuania recently. It's a small country. I think it's near. It used to be part of Poland before the war, World War II. But I was in Europe, Northern Europe, working on a film called Parlor. I played the lead in this. It's also part of what people, I guess, would label the horror genre. I play a painter, a tattoo artist who has this kind of side business. And there's these kids that come from America on vacation from university to have fun and do what kids do. And they come into my tattoo shop. I don't want to give too much away, but it gets kind of interesting after that. So I just recently finished that film. I think it's going to be released next year at some point.
Cool.
Very excited to work on that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I could name a bunch of things that are coming up. I think, with respect to your show, I'm just excited to be on, Totally Driven Radio. I mean, I'm not really much on plugging myself or any of that stuff. I kind of feel like I put stuff out into the world that's just going to kind of like do what it has to do. It'll be effective. I want to try to answer your questions as honestly and respected to you as I can, but at the same time, I don't want it to all be about me. I just feel like the platform itself and us having this conversation is proof to me that it comes back around in a good way. So there's stuff coming up in the new year. I work with a director named Adam Mason. Who I did a film called Junkie, an independent film that came out this year, and I know he wants to work on some stuff. I've been being approached more and more with independent filmmakers that want to do stuff that's outside the box, because I think they can appreciate maybe where I'm coming from, and so we can collaborate. So there's a number of possibilities and things that are already manifesting. I don't want to jinx them by talking too much about them, but there's stuff coming up, and I'm confident. I have to be. We all have to be, right? So
absolutely.
But yeah, that's so that's basically the extent of it.
Well, I know you don't like.
On, man. I'm going to keep swinging, brother. Like we all have to.
Well, I know you said you don't like to, promote yourself or plug yourself too much, but I do want anybody that's listening out there to know that both Letters to My Bully and Playing with Fire are available on Amazon.com. And for those of you that know me from my parenting websites and stuff, Letters to My Bully is one of the books that I constantly suggest to parents that are dealing with bullying issues and want to know about sort of the emotional ramifications of that. So as far as that goes, I'd like to really just, offer you a little bit of thanks and applause for that as well, because that whole book is just filled with some amazing and just heartbreaking stories.
Yeah. It's great. It's great that we're spreading. We're waking up the collective. That there was, we're raising consciousness. Don't you think, for people so they don't feel alone. Yeah, and hurt themselves. They have support groups, people they can talk to that know the struggle, so they don't feel so alone. we've lost a lot of people because that wasn't around. So I think, that book is a lifesaver. So thank you, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So I'm glad that I could support that. It's nice to do good things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, the fans can follow Robert on Twitter, right? At Robert LaSardo.
Well, you know what? That Twitter has been defunct for many years now.
Oh, really?
I'm not too good with social media. I mean, I have there's a Facebook page that my assistant runs, but aside from that, I have the website. But I'm not. I don't communicate on Twitter.
Very good. Well, then everybody can go to Facebook and they can go to your actual website, which is robertlasardo.com, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Cool. Robert, I want to say thank you so much. This has been a great interview. You truly are an incredible person, and you can hear the true heart of a true great human being talking to you, and it was really definitely a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure. Like I said, thank you for having me on Totally Driven Radio, man. It's really exciting. I love the name. The title is great. Totally Driven, because I think it's a great name. I can appreciate the subtext of that too. So. And,
thank you. And that was the whole when we were coming up with the name. I wanted something positive, and I figured Totally Driven was kind of a positive way to go.
Well, I thank you guys for doing your show, and I don't know what it's like to be in that position, but with respect to what you guys do, thank you for what you do, and I can't imagine what it's like to talk to. Obviously, you must love what you do and get enjoyment out of it. But if I had a hat on, I'd take it off to you for doing what you do, man. Because if you didn't do what you do, we wouldn't be talking. So thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, it's true. Thank you. Hey, can I get you to cut a quick ID before I let you go?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Yeah,
this is Robert LaSardo. You go ahead. I beat you to the punch, man.
Go ahead, do it. Work your magic. You say whatever you want to say.
Yeah. This is Robert LaSardo breaking it down on Totally Driven Radio.
That's awesome, Robert. Thank you so much. And hey, if you ever come to Philly, look us up. Let's get together.
Oh, right on, man. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Great. Sounds like a plan. We'll be in touch, man. Take care, and you're welcome back at any time.
Thank you, brothers. Hey, listen, peace to your hearts, man. Have a good holiday. Be safe out there, okay? Just be safe.
You
and enjoy your holiday.
You too. Thank you so much,
too.
Robert.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See ya. All right, everybody. Robert LaSardo. What an incredible person and an incredible interview that was. That might be one of our best interviews, Nick.
I think it was really good, man.
That was awesome. That really was awesome. All right, well, let's...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, let's take a quick commercial break, but say your thought.